Ambassador Reed stood at the large observation window of the orbital station, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath. His silver-scaled hands clasped behind his back as he dictated his final assessment report to the Council's database. Day 90 of Earth observation mission, he spoke clearly. Final report on species 4276C, designated as humans. The blue-green planet continued its peaceful spin, showing no signs of the massive military installations that other spacefaring races typically displayed. No orbital weapon platforms, no visible defense grid, just a handful of primitive satellites and space stations. The human species presents an unusual case, Reed continued. Despite achieving faster-than-light travel 50 Earth years ago, they have maintained minimal military presence in space. Their orbital defenses are, he paused, searching for a diplomatic word, inadequate by Council standards. His assistant, First Observer Wilson, entered the room with a stack of data tablets. "Sir, I've compiled the cultural analysis you requested." Reed nodded, taking one of the tablets. The screen displayed statistics about Earth's entertainment industry. "Fascinating," he muttered. "Their popular media contains countless stories about the horrors of war. They teach their children about the devastation of their past conflicts. Their educational systems emphasize peaceful resolution over military solutions." Wilson pointed to another section of the data. "They spend considerable resources on peacekeeping missions, sir. Their largest military organization is called the Department of Defense, not offense or war." Reed added this to his report. "The species shows clear signs of war trauma on a cultural level. Their historical records indicate numerous global conflicts, but they appear to have learned from these experiences. Unlike the warrior clans of Sector 7 or the battle kings of the Crimson Nebula, humans actively avoid military confrontation." The observation room's lights dimmed as Earth entered its night cycle. Cities gleamed like strings of pearls across the dark continents. "Their military spending has decreased by 15% in the last decade," Wilson added. "They've converted several weapons factories into civilian manufacturing centers." Reed moved to his desk, bringing up more data on his holographic display. "Most telling is their reaction to first contact. When our scout ships appeared in their system, they sent diplomats instead of warships. Their first messages were invitations for cultural exchange, not demands for military information." He paused the recording, remembering that day. The human diplomats had seemed almost eager to share their art, music, and scientific knowledge. Their military capabilities had barely been mentioned. "Based on all available data," Reed resumed, "I must recommend to the Council that humanity be classified as a Category 3 non-aggressive species. They will require protection under the Galactic Defense Treaty, as their apparent fear of warfare has left them vulnerable to more aggressive races." Wilson cleared his throat. "Sir, there is one odd detail. Their military training programs remain active, and they maintain what they call a reserve force in most nations." Reed waved this off. "Merely remnants of their past." First Observer. "Many species maintain ceremonial military traditions long after abandoning actual warfare. Add a footnote if you wish, but my assessment stands." He looked once more at the peaceful planet below. "Final recommendation. Earth should be offered full membership in the Galactic Council under protected status. Their technological achievements meet our standards, and their cultural aversion to warfare makes them ideal candidates for our more civilized society." Reed ended the recording and sent it directly to the Council's central database. In 3 days, he would present these findings to the full assembly. He felt confident in his assessment. After all, he had observed dozens of species during his career. The signs were clear. Humans feared war, perhaps more than any other spacefaring race he had encountered. "Prepare our departure, First Observer Wilson," he ordered. "Our work here is complete." As their ship broke orbit an hour later, Reed felt satisfied. Here was a species that had finally learned the futility of warfare. The Council would welcome such peaceful members. How wrong he was. The great chamber of the Galactic Council sparkled with holographic displays, each showing Earth from different angles. 500 representatives from across the galaxy sat in rising tiers, their attention fixed on Ambassador Reed's presentation. As you can see, Reed gestured to a diagram showing Earth's military spending. Humans have consistently reduced their combat capabilities over the past decades. They maintain only basic defensive forces. Ambassador James Thompson, Earth's representative, sat quietly in the observers section. His face remained neutral, though his fingers tapped gently on his armrest. Next to him, his aide passed him a note. He read it, then crushed it silently. Most telling, Reed continued, is their reaction to conflict. When faced with potential warfare, humans immediately seek diplomatic solutions. Their military bases are called peacekeeping installations. Their largest ships are designated as humanitarian vessels. The council president, a tall being with crystalline features, leaned forward. You believe they require our protection? Indeed, President. Reed nodded. Their fear of warfare has left them vulnerable. While admirable, this passive nature could make them targets for more aggressive species. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Several representatives nodded in agreement, while others brought up data screens showing Earth's history. But what of their historical records? Asked a representative from the northern arm. They show numerous conflicts. Reed smiled confidently. Yes, and those very conflicts traumatized them so deeply that they now fear war above all else. They teach their children about these wars as cautionary tales. Their entertainment media consistently portrays warfare as horrific and devastating. Thompson shifted in his seat, his expression still carefully neutral. His aide whispered something, but he shook his head slightly. We've seen this before, another council member added. Species that experience severe military conflicts often swing to extreme pacifism. Remember the Shell people of Sector 12. The council president raised a hand for silence. Ambassador Thompson, would you care to comment on these observations? All eyes turned to the human representative. Thompson stood slowly, straightened his simple black uniform, and walked to the speaker's position. For a moment, he said nothing, just looked around the chamber. The council's assessment is, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Interesting. We appreciate the thorough observation of our cultures and traditions. However, there is no need for embarrassment. Ambassador, Reed interrupted kindly. Many species require protection in their early years of galactic membership. It's quite common. Thompson's lips twitched slightly. As I was saying, we appreciate the assessment. Earth accepts the offer of council membership. He stopped there, not correcting their assumptions, not explaining further. Then it is settled, the council president declared. Earth will be granted protected status under Article 7 of the Galactic Charter. We will station defensive fleets in their system to ensure their safety. As the council members discussed the details of Earth's protection, Thompson returned to his seat. His aide looked at him questioningly. Let them think what they want, Thompson whispered. Admiral Anderson always says the best defense is the one your opponent doesn't know about. The council continued their planning, assigning patrol routes and discussing defensive strategies. None of them noticed Thompson sending a brief message on his communicator. Assessment complete. Proceed as planned. In the depths of Earth's oceans, in hidden mountain bases, and in scattered asteroid facilities throughout their solar system, humans continued their quiet preparations, not because they feared war, but because 5,000 years of human history had taught them something the Council had yet to learn. The species that survives isn't the one that fears war the most, but the one that is most prepared for it. The Council's meeting continued, their plans built on a foundation of misunderstanding, and Earth's representatives let them plan, knowing that sometimes the best defense was letting others underestimate you. The emergency alarms in the council chamber had been ringing for 3 hours straight. Red lights flashed across worried faces as reports of attacks flooded in from across the galaxy. Another colony lost in Sector 7. A controller's voice echoed through the chamber. The Ravagers have overrun our defensive line. The council president stood at the central platform, watching as more red dots appeared on the giant holographic map. Each dot represented another fallen world. Around him, council members argued in panic. How did they break through our patrols? 20 worlds in 3 days. Where did these ravagers come from? Ambassador Thompson sat quietly in his usual spot, watching. The council's mighty defense fleet, spread thin trying to protect too many worlds at once, was failing. The ravagers' black ships cut through their formations like knives through paper. Their attack pattern makes no sense, said Reed, now the council's chief of defense. His silver scales had dulled with stress. They strike randomly, without warning. No demands, no communication, just destruction. The holographic display showed another battle. The council's ships, arranged in their traditional perfect formations, faced the chaotic swarm of Ravager vessels. The council ships fired their weapons in coordinated patterns, exactly as their military doctrine demanded. They died in coordinated patterns too. Their ships are inferior to ours, a military advisor reported. Smaller, less advanced. But they don't fight like we expect. They don't follow any known combat protocols. Thompson touched his communicator, sending a brief message. Watching chaos teach order some lessons. Stand by. A new alert blared. The council president's voice shook as he read the report. The Ravagers have destroyed our main fleet at Junction Point 9. He paused, horror in his eyes. They're heading for the core worlds. Panic erupted in the chamber. The core worlds were the heart of council space, home to their oldest civilizations. If they fell, we must evacuate the council, someone shouted. We need a safe haven. All eyes turned to the human ambassador. Earth, sitting quietly at the edge of council space, was still untouched by the attacks. Protected status meant the council had placed defensive fleets around it, fleets that were now needed elsewhere. The council president approached Thompson. Ambassador, given your people's peaceful nature, would Earth be willing to serve as a refuge? We can withdraw our protective fleets. You won't be a target if we're not there. Thompson stood slowly. For the first time since the crisis began, he smiled. Of course we'll help, Mr. President, but not quite in the way you are suggesting. He walked to the central platform and activated his own data feed. A new hologram appeared, Earth's solar system, but it looked different from the Council's previous scans. Much different. What you're seeing, Thompson explained calmly, is what your observers weren't meant to see. Humanity doesn't fear war, Mr. President. We respect it. There's a difference. The Council members stared at the hologram. Hidden bases emerged from Earth's oceans. Cloaked stations appeared in orbit. Asteroid bases uncloaked throughout the solar system. You see, Thompson continued, when you fear something, you hide from it. When you respect it, you prepare for it. And humanity has been preparing for a very long time. He pressed another button on the display. Admiral Anderson, I believe it's time to show the galaxy why humans don't fear war. We just prefer to avoid it when possible. A new voice, calm and confident, filled the chamber. Understood, Ambassador. Earth Defense Fleet moving to combat positions. All units, Operation Thunderstep is now in effect. The Council members watched in shock as the helpless human world they had pitied transformed into a fortress of war. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the Ravagers were about to learn why humans told so many stories about the horrors of war. They had written those stories from experience. The Council chamber had changed in the past few hours. The once pristine hall now served as an emergency command center, with screens showing battles across dozen sectors. In the center, Admiral Kate Anderson's hologram stood tall, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to the ornate robes of the Council members. Let me be clear, Anderson said, her voice steady. Earth doesn't just offer sanctuary. We offer military assistance. The Council president blinked all four of his eyes. Military assistance, but your species, Ambassador Reed's reports, were based on what we wanted him to see, Anderson replied. She gestured, and new holograms appeared. Earth ships emerged from hidden docks, their designs unlike anything the Council had seen. Not beautiful like Council vessels, but functional, built for war. Impossible, Reed whispered, his silver scales pale. We monitored your planet for months. These ships, these facilities, were there all along, Thompson said from his seat. We've had centuries to perfect our camouflage technology. What better way to protect peace than to hide your strength until it's needed? A new alert flashed. The Ravagers had taken 3 more systems. Their black ships were now just 2 jumps from the Council's capital world. We don't have time for this, Anderson stated. Every minute we waste, more worlds fall. The Ravagers don't follow your rules of warfare because they never learned them. But humans, she smiled grimly. We wrote the book on breaking rules. The Council's military commander, General Stone, stepped forward. His crystalline form sparkled with anger. Our forces are the finest in the galaxy. We don't need help from a species that hides its weapons. Your finest forces are dying, Anderson countered, because they fight like it's a parade. War isn't about looking good, General. It's about surviving. Another alert. Another world lost. The Council President's hands shook as he read the casualty reports. Perhaps, he began, looking at his fellow Council members, perhaps we should consider. No, General Stone interrupted. It goes against all our military traditions. Our battle doctrine has served us for 10,000 years. Thompson stood up. And in 3 days, the Ravagers have torn that doctrine to pieces. Mr. President, we don't offer help because we want to fight. We offer help because we know how to fight dirty and survive. Anderson nodded. The Ravagers think they're monsters. Wait until they meet humanity's dark side. We've spent thousands of years learning every dirty trick, every underhanded tactic, every way to win when you're outgunned and outnumbered. On the main screen, another Council fleet died in perfect formation. Beautiful, organized, dead. The Council President looked at his dying empire, then at the human representatives. You understand, he said slowly, that accepting your help means admitting we were wrong about your species. With respect, Mr. President, Thompson replied, being wrong is better than being dead. Anderson's hologram shifted, showing tactical displays. Earth's fleet can deploy in 6 hours. We've already analyzed the Ravagers' attack patterns. They're not random. They're hunting, like wolves. Well, humanity knows how to hunt too. The Council chamber fell silent. Centuries of tradition and pride warred with the need to survive. Finally, the President spoke. The Council. He paused, swallowing his pride. The Council formally requests Earth's military assistance. Request accepted, Anderson said immediately. All Earth forces, execute Operation Wolfhound. Show these Ravagers why humans don't fear war. We master it. As the human ships moved into position, Ambassador Reed approached Thompson. You let us think you were weak. Thompson watched the tactical displays, where human vessels were already shifting into attack positions. No, Ambassador. We let you think we were like you. That was your mistake. The first reports of human combat tactics began to arrive. The Ravagers were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that chooses not to bare its teeth until it must. The Council's emergency command center was silent except for the steady beep of battle displays. All eyes were fixed on the main screen, watching Earth's forces engage the Ravagers for the first time. That's impossible, General Stone whispered. They're not following any formation at all. The human ships moved like a swarm of angry wasps, breaking every rule of space combat the Council held sacred. Where Council ships fought in neat lines, human vessels attacked from multiple angles. Where Council doctrine demanded direct confrontation, human ships struck from the shadows. Admiral Anderson's hologram stood in the center of the room, calmly issuing orders. Task Force Delta, execute attack pattern Gorilla 7. Task Force Echo, prepare for Operation Thunderclap. The Council's military experts watched in confusion as human ships deliberately scattered before Ravager attacks, only to regroup and strike from unexpected directions. They weren't just fighting, they were adapting. Their tactics make no sense, Reed said, his silver scales reflecting the red battle alerts. How can they coordinate when they're so chaotic? Thompson smiled. We learned long ago that the perfect formation is often the perfect target. Chaos can be a weapon if you know how to use it. On the main display, a group of Ravager ships chased what appeared to be a retreating human fleet. The council members held their breath, expecting to see another massacre. Instead, the human ships led their pursuers into a carefully prepared trap. Hidden vessels emerged from nearby asteroid fields, catching the Ravagers in a devastating crossfire. You see, Anderson explained, humans don't just study war. We study everything that helps us win. Psychology, deception, the art of making your enemy defeat themselves. A new tactical display showed human ground forces retaking a fallen council world. Instead of marching in standard attack formations, they moved in small, fast groups, striking Ravager positions before melting away into the terrain. These aren't standard military tactics, General Stone protested. This is how you survive when you're outnumbered, Thompson finished. Humanity spent thousands of years fighting itself. We learned that victory doesn't always go to the strongest. It goes to the smartest, the most adaptable, the most willing to do whatever it takes. The council president watched as human forces systematically dismantled another Ravager fleet. But your peaceful nature, your fear of conflict. We don't fear conflict, Anderson corrected. We fear unnecessary conflict. Every human weapon, every tactic you're seeing, was developed because we had to survive. We build weapons precisely because we understand their cost. The displays showed more human ships emerging from hyperspace. Each vessel bore scars and patches, signs of constant modification and improvement. Unlike the pristine council ships, these were tools, tested and refined through actual combat. Look at their ships, one council member gasped. They're all different. Of course, Thompson nodded. We adapt our weapons based on experience. Each ship is modified based on what we've learned in battle. We don't build for show. We build to win. A massive Ravager dreadnought appeared on the screens, bearing down on a human task force. Instead of fleeing or forming a defensive line, the human ships scattered in what looked like panic. The Ravager ship pursued one group, only to have the others attack from its blind spots, targeting specific vulnerabilities that council forces hadn't even noticed. That's why we tell stories about the horrors of war, Anderson said quietly. Not because we fear it, but because we respect its power. We know exactly what war can do, and that's what makes us dangerous. The council chamber fell silent again as they watched humanity reveal its true nature. They had thought humans feared war because they hated fighting. Now they understood the truth. Humans hated fighting precisely because they were so good at it. And the Ravagers were learning this lesson the hard way. Fire bloomed in space as another Ravager ship exploded. The Council's emergency command center was silent, watching the battle unfold on their screens. This wasn't the organized, proper warfare they knew. This was something else entirely. Status report. Admiral Anderson's voice cut through the silence. Her hologram stood steady in the center of the room. Operation Thunderstrike is working, a controller replied. The Ravagers are falling for it. They're chasing our retreating forces exactly as predicted. Thompson stood beside the council president, watching the main display. The human ships appeared to flee in panic, breaking formation and scattering. The Ravager fleet, eager for an easy victory, split up to chase them. I don't understand, General Stone muttered. Your ships are running away. This is shameful. Watch, Thompson said simply. The scattered human ships suddenly changed course. Each group of fleeing vessels turned to attack their pursuers. What looked like panic had been a carefully planned trap. The Ravagers, spread thin by their pursuit, found themselves fighting dozens of small battles instead of one big one. Classic divide and conquer, Anderson explained. Let your enemy think they're winning. Let their confidence become their weakness. The displays showed more battles across different sectors. Human forces used every trick they knew. Mines hidden in debris fields, fake distress signals that led to ambushes, small ships that packed surprisingly powerful weapons. "Sir," a controller called out, "the Ravagers are trying to regroup their forces." Anderson smiled. "Just as expected. Activate Phase 2. New signals appeared on the tactical display. Hidden human ships emerged from their positions near the Ravagers' rally points. The trap within a trap was sprung. "You planned this?" Reed asked, his silver scales reflecting the battle lights. "All of it. Humans have been planning for war since we first picked up sticks and rocks," Thompson replied. "Each trick you're seeing was learned through centuries of conflict. We don't fight fair. We fight to win." On the screens, human forces struck from every direction. Small, fast ships darted between the larger Ravager vessels, hitting weak points that Council forces hadn't even noticed. Larger human warships provided covering fire, but not in the traditional way. They fired irregular patterns, making it impossible for the Ravagers to predict where the next shot would come from. "Look at their formations," one Council member said. "There's no pattern at all." "That is the pattern," Anderson corrected. "Unpredictability. The only predictable soldier is a dead soldier." The Ravager fleet began to break apart. Some ships tried to retreat, others fought on, but without coordination or plan. The mighty force that had terrorized the galaxy was falling apart in the face of human warfare. "Send the message," Anderson commanded. All human ships broadcast the same signal to the remaining Ravager vessels: surrender or be destroyed. You have 1 minute to decide. The Council chamber held its breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, Ravager ships began powering down their weapons. "They're surrendering." General Stone sounded shocked. "The Ravagers never surrender." "Everyone surrenders," Thompson said quietly, "when they realize they're fighting an enemy who knows more about warfare than they do." The final numbers appeared on screen. Over 300 Ravager ships destroyed or captured. The rest in full retreat. Human casualties: minimal. "Now you understand," Anderson told the stunned Council. "Humans don't avoid war because we're afraid. We avoid it because we're too good at it. War is a last resort precisely because we know how effectively we can wage it." The displays showed Ravager forces retreating across the galaxy, running from an enemy they had completely underestimated. They had expected to find a weak, fearful species. Instead, they had found humanity, and they had learned why humans tell so many stories about the horrors of war. Because humans write those stories from experience. 1 month after the final battle, the Council chamber looked very different. The emergency displays were gone, replaced by the usual diplomatic screens. But the Council members had changed. They looked at the human representatives with new eyes. The Council president stood at the central platform, addressing the full assembly. "Today, we gather to correct a mistake. Our assessment of humanity was wrong. Deeply wrong." Ambassador Thompson sat in his usual place, but now other species gave his seat a wide berth. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Behind him, Admiral Anderson's hologram stood quietly. "We thought humans feared war," the president continued. "We saw their peaceful actions, their careful diplomacy, their stories about war's horrors, and we made assumptions. We were wrong." Reed stepped forward, his silver scales gleaming. "If I may, I would like to present my revised assessment of humanity." The Council chamber grew quiet. Everyone remembered Reed's first report, the one that had labeled humans as weak and fearful. "Humans," Reed began, "don't fear war. They master it. Every peaceful gesture, every diplomatic solution, every careful negotiation. These don't come from weakness. They come from strength." The main screen showed images from the recent battles. Human ships using tactics that still shock the Council. Soldiers adapting strategies mid-battle. Weapons that showed centuries of development and refinement. Their reluctance to fight, Reed continued, comes from understanding warfare too well. They avoid war not because they can't fight, but because they know exactly how well they can fight. Thompson stood up. If I may add something. The president nodded. Humanity's greatest weapon isn't our ships, our tactics, or our soldiers, Thompson said. It's our memory. We remember every war we fought, every lesson learned, every cost paid. That's why we choose peace when we can, and why we fight so hard when we must. Anderson's hologram stepped forward. The Ravagers taught you something about humanity, but they learned something too. They learned why we tell our children about war's horrors, not to make them afraid, but to make them wise. The screens showed the aftermath of the war. Ravager forces had retreated to their own territory, signing peace treaties as quickly as they could. They had learned what happened when you pushed a species that had mastered warfare. Therefore, the Council President announced, "We are changing humanity's classification. They are not, as we thought, a species that needs protection. They are a species that has learned to protect peace through strength." A new council member raised his hand. But their military spending, their peaceful programs, are the mark of a species that understands war's true cost. Thompson replied, "We maintain peace through strength, diplomacy through understanding, and safety through preparation." The president nodded. From this day forward, the Council recognizes Earth not as a protected world, but as a protecting one. Their methods may shock us, their tactics may surprise us, but their goals align with ours. Peace through strength. Anderson's hologram smiled slightly. We have a saying on Earth, if you want peace, prepare for war. We didn't build our forces because we wanted to fight. We built them because we wanted to make sure that if we had to fight, we would win. The council chamber was silent for a moment. Then the president spoke again. Let the record show that humanity's greatest strength isn't their weapons or their tactics. It's their wisdom. They don't fear war. They respect it. And that respect has made them the most dangerous peacekeepers in the galaxy. As the session ended, Reed approached Thompson one last time. I have just one question, the alien said. Why did you let us think you were weak? Thompson smiled. Because the best defense is the one your enemy doesn't know about. We didn't deceive you. We just let you make your own assumptions, just like we've done for centuries. The council had learned their lesson. Humans weren't peaceful because they were weak. They were peaceful because they were strong enough to understand the true cost of war. And that made them the perfect guardians of peace.